the timeless past.
Pharaoh's Egypt, a time of great wealth, power, and luxury. But what was it like to live in such a society? Did everyone get to enjoy the benefits of living in this great empire? How did people of different social classes live? And most importantly, did they get to experience love? Hi everyone, welcome to my channel. Today we will be discussing love and survival in Pharaoh's Egypt. The rulers of ancient Egypt were considered divine, living among us mere mortals but also above us. They were thought to be demigods with godlike powers. They ruled over the entire region for hundreds of years. During the New Kingdom period, which lasted from 1543 to 1069 BC, Egypt was at its peak. It stretched from the Mediterranean Sea to the Nubian Desert and was home to millions of people from various cultures. Under the rule of Ramesses II, one of the longest reigning pharaohs, Egypt expanded even further. It was during this time that the love story of Ramesses II and his wife Nefertari took place. Ramesses II had many wives and children, but he loved only one, the beautiful and intelligent Queen Mother Nefertari. She was not an Egyptian, but a Syrian captured during the war. He married her despite her background and elevated her to the position of great of praises, his beloved, his partner, his equal, his chosen, his sweetheart, his precious one, his only one, his shining star, his all. Their relationship is immortalized through countless monuments and carvings all throughout Egypt. One of these is the famous bust of Queen Nefertiti. It was discovered by German archaeologist Ludwig Borchardt in 1912 during the excavation of Tutankhamun's tomb. Many believe that she is the most beautiful sculpture ever made, but there is a curse associated with it. Whoever owns the bust will never enjoy peace. The discovery of the bust led to a bitter argument between the Egyptians and Germans, which resulted in the deterioration of diplomatic ties between the two countries. The bust was taken to Berlin, where it has been housed ever since. It is a bas-relief sculpture carved from limestone. It stands 18 inches tall and is 12 inches wide. It depicts the queen wearing a unique sun hat called a nemes, which was only worn by the pharaoh. This shows how powerful and influential she was in Ramesses's life. The bust shows her wearing a tight dress that highlights her small waist and ample bosom, which were signs of feminine beauty at the time. Her body is turned slightly to the left, and her gaze is directed forward with great intensity. Despite being only 18 inches tall, she seems to command the viewer with her confident and assertive look. She wears blue and green eyeshadow and bright red lipstick. Her delicate features are highlighted by the sharp angles of the limestone blocks. There is no smile on her face, as the Egyptians believed that showing teeth was a sign of disrespect. Instead, she has thin lips that are gently pressed together. The main reason why the bust was so captivating was because of the materials used. Limestone was not commonly used for sculptures, and the smooth texture of the stone made the sculpture come alive. In order to create such a masterpiece, a highly skilled sculptor would have been required. The technique used is called contrapposto, which means set against. It is when the torso twists in one direction and the head and shoulders twist in another. The technique was brought to Egypt by Greek artists, and only a master sculptor could execute it properly. Unfortunately, we don't know who created the bust, but it was probably one of the greatest sculptors of all time. Ramesses II was obsessed with Nefertari and built numerous monuments and temples dedicated to her. He loved her more than any of his other wives and showered her with gifts. When he returned to Thebes after defeating the Hittites in battle, he brought her back with him as a trophy. Unlike other women captured in war, she was not forced into sexual slavery. Instead, Ramesses chose her to be his great wife. She became the mother of his favorite son, Ramesses, and was always by his side. After her death, he mourned her for 3 years and built her a spectacular tomb in the Valley of the Queens. It was decorated with images of her and Ramesses and took 4 years to complete. Even though it was smaller than the Valley of the King's Tombs, it was still very luxurious and expensive. Only the elite of Egyptian society could afford such lavish burials. Egyptian women were generally subservient to men, and their rights depended on the ruler's preferences. However, under Ramesses II, women had more freedom than usual. He allowed them to own property and gave them more opportunities for education and employment. For example, his daughter, Princess Nefertiti, was a strong advocate for women's rights. She challenged traditional gender roles and was an excellent example of an independent woman. She was educated in theology, medicine, mathematics, and many other subjects. She also accompanied her father on military campaigns and was involved in religious ceremonies. But despite her progressive views, she could not escape the constraints of royal life. When her father died, she had to marry her brother, Ramesses, and give up her title. In general, marriage was an important part of Egyptian life. Most people married in their early 20s, and divorce was relatively easy. Arranged marriages were common, but the bride and groom usually had the right to refuse the match. Polygamy was also accepted, and both men and women could have multiple partners. But the main wife had the highest status, and her children had the right to inherit property. The family was important in Egyptian culture, and children were seen as a blessing. They were cared for by wet nurses and servants, and education was considered essential. Parents often hired private tutors for their children, and the curriculum focused on practical skills and religious beliefs. Although the Egyptians had many achievements and innovations, they were also responsible for some of the worst things that have ever happened to mankind. Slavery was widespread in Egypt, and most slaves were prisoners of war or criminals. They were considered property and could be bought, sold, or inherited. Slaves were used in agriculture, mining, and construction, and were often subjected to harsh punishments. They were also denied basic rights and freedoms, and were considered less than human. Egypt was one of the wealthiest societies of the ancient world, but poverty was still widespread. The majority of the population was poor and lived in poverty. They lived in small villages and worked as farmers, laborers, or artisans. They were constantly struggling to survive and often went hungry. Unfortunately, our knowledge of everyday life in Egypt is limited because most of what we know comes from the elite. We know very little about the lives of ordinary people. However, we can make some educated guesses based on what we do know. For example, we know that food was scarce, so it's likely that people didn't eat much meat. They probably ate mostly vegetables, fruits, and grains. We also know that healthcare was rudimentary at best, so it's likely that people died young and often from preventable diseases. Ancient Egypt was a fascinating civilization with many achievements and innovations. It was a time of great wealth and power, but it was also a time of poverty and hardship. The people of Egypt were a diverse group, and their experiences varied greatly depending on their social class. We may never know everything about everyday life in Egypt, but the secrets that have been uncovered so far are truly amazing. The love story of Ramesses II and his wife Nefertiti is one of the most well-known stories from ancient Egypt. The discovery of the bust of Nefertiti is one of the most significant archaeological discoveries of the 20th century. It has captivated the world and sparked the imagination of many. The bust is a beautiful example of Egyptian art and a reminder of the great love that once existed between a pharaoh and his wife. So, what do you think about this love story? Let me know in the comments below. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe so that you don't miss out on any of our future videos. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up and share it with your friends. Stay tuned for more. We'll see you next time.